Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are gathered today on the 23rd of November, 2024, on the Gregorian calendar, which happens to line up with the 14th of the ninth month on our Creator's calendar as we are reckoning it um, according to what is in Scripture, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and what they call the apocryphal or hidden writings, right? Everything that is in his revealed word in regard to the calendar as we comprehend it. But that being said, we're continuing with our reading of the testaments of the 12 patriarchs. We've gone through 10 of them so far, and we're on the last two sons of Yaakov, or Yisrael. The testament of Louis here is next. He passed away at 137, and he only had one of his brothers to outlive him, which was the youngest, Benjamin, at least as far as I comprehended the way things are written here. There is some ambiguity, or rather, there's some error in regard to timelines in relation to the testaments here and the book of Yobelim, which gives us the dates of things of like when they were born, and this gives us how long they lived and the corresponding events that were going along in regard to them in particular or specifically. As the sons of Jacob died, they were being taken into Canaan and buried. After a time, there was a war that prevented that, and they had to go up secretly to bury them after it was blocked off, which is what is recounted in the testament of Amram, or the visions of Amram, and alluded to in the book of Yobelim. And that date is a little bit off compared to the dates of when they died. Um, I believe we looked at it a little bit. I haven't done an in-depth thing yet, but in the Telegram chat, it has all the dates, and I believe Louis's death date is 1 year after the year that they would have taken up the bodies to bury them. And then Benjamin's is 4 or 5 years after, which obviously can't be correct. Um, so not to be dogmatic about those things, we know that the events happened. You have multiple witnesses of the facts of the accounts going on, but we don't have the exact timeline correct. And that's pretty consistent with what we can see with the rest of Scripture, where the timelines have been perverted, and we've been told that we won't know the day or the hour for certain things, right, until he comes. Another witness for that is when Yahushua, or when Yahuwah, the pre-incarnate Mashiach with our Father in him, was on Mount Sinai face to face speaking with Moshe like a man speaks to his friend. When he was giving him the book of Yobelim and dictating for him to write down the accounts that he was telling him, he gave him the full comprehension of what time he was living in. And it wasn't until that point that they knew for certain anymore. So I think there's something to that for our regard as well. But with that being said, this is the testament of Louis, and we're going to be taking a little bit longer on this one than we would on others. It is the longest, but it also has the longest intact version that was kept amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls. If I can show that to you very quickly, right here. This is from a new translation. It's just a picture of the pages covering it. It's the words of Levi, and then you can see right here, these are the scrolls and the text and the fragments in regard to what is collected right here. The Dead Sea Scroll fragments go from 4Q 213 all the way right here to 1Q 21. And then you have the Geniza fragments and Mount Athos Greek text. These are two other manuscripts that also had the Testament of Levi, or Louis, that they've compiled together. For whatever reason, they didn't put the complete translation here. They still have just fragments and breaks when they could have filled it in, but it tends to have a fuller version of what you can see. We're not going to read both accounts all the way through, but I do want to point out certain things here, in particular, this prayer that he had. But we'll get to that when we do. So Right here, it's the Testament of Louis or Levi. They say Levi in modern Hebrew, and that's with the waw as a vav or a v. In the classical Hebrew, or what they call biblical Hebrew, that predates the Babylonian captivity or the modern text at all, the bet or the waw never made the V sound. It was always the bet that made it, still does too. It makes the B or the V depending. So this would have been like Louis, Louis, literally Louis, but Louis is another derivative. Levi also came from it, but it means joined unto me, is the point. So it says, the copy of the words of Louis, the things which he ordained unto his sons according to all that they should do, and what things should befall them until the day of judgment. He was sound in health when he called them to him, for it had been revealed to him that he should die, just like it was revealed to Rebekah and revealed to Naphtali, revealed to Asher. They knew beforehand, because Yahuwah does no thing without revealing it to his servants, the foretellers. And if you're a servant of him, he lets you know these things before they come to pass. Another example of that is Abraham Lincoln. I've read a little bit of the accounts there before, but you can see about in his life, he knew that he was going to be possibly a martyr, or like Moshe, having to die before the people could be brought into the promised land. He didn't think he'd make it outside of the war before the liberation of the people from the grip of slavery and sedition. That's for a different time, though. So, and when they were gathered together, he said to them, I, Louis, was born in Haran, and I came with my father to Shechem. And I was young, about 20 years of age, when with Shimon I wrought vengeance on Hamor for our sister Dinah, who was 12 years old when she was defiled. That's mentioned in the book of Yobelim. Zebulun being the same age at the time, because they were twins. They were both born on the first of the seventh month, if you remember. Or the seventh month. I'll have to double check. But either way, it says, and when I was feeding the flocks in Abu Mal, the ruach of comprehension of Yahuwah came upon me, and I saw all men corrupting their way, and that unrighteousness had built for itself walls, and lawlessness sat upon towers. The wall builders and the towers, these things have to do with Nimrod, Semiramis, Babylon, and in a physical way. And then in the spiritual, it was the the fortifications in error, the idolatry and things that were built up that were keeping men led astray, that he's talking about here. It says, and I was grieving for the race of the sons of men, and I prayed to Yahuwah that I might be delivered. Okay, that's all it says in regard to his prayer there. And it goes, then there fell upon me a sleep, and I beheld, and it goes on to tell what he had in his vision. This is all that the Greek version that we have actually says in regard to what that prayer was. Now I'd like to show you, this is some of what I'm talking about when I'm saying we can't be overly dogmatic, or we can't look at any of these writings and say, oh, this is the only thing that was ever there, and that is what you must believe. Because if we do that with any one, we could be believing things that just aren't true. And here's a great example of that. This right here is the actual prayer that he had, and that is nowhere written in the Greek text, but it actually covers that. So right here, we're going to read it real quick. It says, then I washed my clothing and purified them with clean water, and I bathed all over in fresh water, so making all my ways correct. Then I raised my eyes and face to Shamayim. I opened my mouth and spoke, and my fingers and hands I spread out properly in front of the Kodesh Melachim, or set apart messengers. Some people believe that the Aaronic blessing, as they call it, or what the Kohanim would give in baraking the people in the name of Yahuwah, they would do so with their hands in what you'd call like the sign of Spock from Star Trek, where he says, "Live long and prosper," and you have that three um, three-fingered like sheen where he's giving like a peace sign for the Vulcan or whatever it was. I don't really remember those things, but the sign that he would give, that was talked about because he was a Yahudi or a Jew, they said. But that was the sign that the Kohanim or the priests would put over the people when they lift up their hands and prayed over them. Whether that is true or not, I can't say definitively. But right here, you have an example of Louis washing himself, becoming clean, and then lifting up his hands and spreading them out properly and praying, whatever that might mean. It says, "So I prayed and said, Yahuwah, you know all hearts, all the thoughts of the mind you alone comprehend. Now, my brothers," and the Mount Athos manuscript says sons, which would be more accurate since only one brother is living with him. But it says, "Now my brother's sons are with me, so entrust to me the right ways. Remove from me," although when he said this, he was 19. Remember when he prayed, I'm sorry, 18. It'll say a little later on in this text that when they came into land, he was about 20 years old, it just mentioned, but it'll go over it again, saying when he was 18, they came from Haran and left Laban's land, or Armenia, sorry. So it says, "Now my brothers are with me, so entrust to me the right ways. Remove from me, Yahuwah, the immoral ruach. Rid me of wicked thoughts and unchastity. Reveal to me, Yahuwah, the Kodesh ruach, counsel, and hokmah, and knowledge, and strength. Grant me so I can do what pleases you and find favor with you, praising your words with me. Yahuwah, doing what is proper and right in your eyes. Let no demonic adversary have power over me, making me wander from your path." Now, this is very reminiscent of what Abraham had prayed to be delivered from the evil Ruach oath, which we've covered and we will cover again, but it's in chapter 12 of the book of Yobelim, or Jubilees. And this prayer, as well as the prayer in that section, I believe Noach's prayer also is covered in a video that we've done on prayer and how he literally answers the prayers of those that serve him to the word for word, doing the thing they desire when asked. And here's another example of what you can see that here. "And righteous men appealing to him by the law is what he will always hearken to." So it says, "Let no demonic adversary have power over me, making me wander from your path. Have chesed, or mercy, on me, Yahuwah, and draw me near to be your servant and to worship you properly. May your wall of shalom be around me. May the shelter of your might protect me from all harm. Purify my heart, Yahuwah, from all impurity, that I myself may be lifted up to you." Now, most people are not familiar with this, but here's a great thing to think about. And I highly encourage everyone to test this for yourself, to go check it out, and don't just take my word for it. In the 10 Commandments, which are what our Creator wrote with his own finger, what our Mashiach wrote with his own finger on tablets of stone, it was put in the ark there. It's what was ratified by blood, and it is the eternal covenant that is the duty of all mankind to observe, is the 10 Commandments and the right rulings that he's given us to live by, right? But in there, on the 10 Commandments, on number 3, where it's commanding not to take or lift up, bear, and carry the name of Yahuwah to naught vanity, falsehood, a lie, or ruin. It mentions because he will not purify or cleanse. It's not that he will not leave unpunished. That's a false translation. He will not purify the one who lifts up his name to naught. Something to keep in mind when we ask to be purified, we can't be calling on wrong names and expect that to happen. It is directly contrary to what is in the Ten Commandments. And then that is something that everybody can look up for themselves. But it says, purify my heart, Yahuwah, from all impurity, that I myself may be lifted up to you. Do not hide your face from the son of your servant, Jacob. You, Yahuwah, have Baruch, my great-grandfather Abraham, and my great-grandmother Sarah, and commanded that they be granted righteous descendants forever, Baruch. So he gave that to them, to your seed and your seed after you from this time forever. That was the promise given. So he's calling on that. He says, so hear also the prayer of your servant Louis, that he may draw near to you. Let me share your word so as to render proper judgment forever, my sons and I, for all generations. So do not reject your servant's sons from your presence for all eternity. And I began to pray silently. Then you can see here, he went on to with his father Jacob, and when they went to Abel Main, there he lay down and he remained, and he was shown visions in the appearance of a vision, and he saw the Shamayim. And this is where it breaks off here. We're going to hop back onto the other version to read it, and you can see that for yourself real quick, but I just wanted to show you. I just wanted to show you what it said right there. And then you can see it still talks about it a little bit, but it breaks off because this is in fragments. So if you give me just one moment, now we'll go back to right here. And this is the vision that he actually had after he had that prayer. Please keep in mind the things that he said in it, because that's directly relevant to what you're going to hear right here. And then it says, then there fell upon me a sleep, and I beheld a high mountain, and I was upon it. And behold, the Shamayim were opened, and a messenger of Elohim said to me, Louis, enter. Now you can see there's 3 different manuscript versions here. We're going to read one of them. I don't know why there's 3, but there's going to be different references to multiple numbers of heavens, or Shamayim, if you will. This is one of the texts outside of the ascension of Yeshayahu, or the ascension of Isaiah, if you will, and the Against Heresies by Irenaeus, and possibly one other place. Oh, also the songs of the Sabbath sacrifices in the Dead Sea Scrolls that mention multiple, specifically 7 Shamayim, or 7 heavens, 7 firmaments, quite like, or not firmaments, but 7 different layers that you have to go through to get to the highest heaven. And that is the place in which the immortal, the Father dwells with his Son and those that are with them for all time, right? And that's where he is the most high at. But it's a reason why you see 7 colors in a rainbow. There's 7 layers, and there's 7 pictures to go through there. It's explained in all these different texts in different ways, but not every version of this might have it that way. So we'll go ahead and read one. I think it's going to be the one on the right here. You can, by all means, take the time to look at all of these and see what they say. Okay? They're not generally going to be contradicting each other. They're just not going to have all the information. But he says, Louis, enter. And I entered from the first Shamayim into the second, and I saw there a sea hanging between the one and the other. And that was the firmament that separated the waters above from the waters below. The waters above the firmament make an ocean for the first layer of the Shamayim above it, like where they look down into the waters to see mankind, right? A picture kind of like what we do when we're looking into the ocean. You pull the fish out. There's a whole typology there that compares. But that's for a different time. So he says, and he came into the second, and I saw there the sea hanging between the one and the other. And further, I saw a third heaven far brighter and more brilliant than these two, for there was also a boundless height therein. All right, and he goes into great detail talking about the information in the text there that you guys can look at if you want to. And I said unto the messenger, wherefore is it so? And the messenger said unto me, marvel not at these, for you shall see four other Shamayim more brilliant and incomparable. So you have the one that he just passed, the second one that he was going for, the third one above it, right? And that's third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and then, or I'm sorry, yeah, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. So that total seven here. I just can't count apparently. All right, verse 10. When you have ascended there, because you shall stand near Yahuwah and shall be his minister, just what he asked for, and his mysteries shall you declare to men, just what he asked for, and shall proclaim concerning the redemption of Yisrael, right? Which is part of the revealing of his mysteries. It's everything that he came to do, right? And by you and Yahudah, Yahuwah appear among men, or shall Yahuwah appear among men, saving every race of men. And from Yahuwah's portion shall be your life, and he shall be your field and vineyard, and fruits, gold and silver. Hear therefore regarding the seven Shamayim. The lowest is for this cause gloomier, since it beholds all the unrighteous deeds of men. The second has fire, snow, ice ready for the day of the ordinance of Yahuwah in the righteous judgment of Elohim. And this is where he stores up the armies and the treasures of wrath and the things of judgment, right? That he has the treasuries in his storehouses, as mentioned in the Psalms and Proverbs, as gone into in the book of Hanok in some detail about the winds and the doors that open up there for what purposes, right? If you recall, the word for wind is ruach. It's the same for breath, wind, and spirit, if you will. It says, in it are all the ruach oath of the retributions for vengeance on the lawless. In the third are the host of the armies, which are ordained for the day of judgment, to work vengeance on the Ruach oath or spirits of deceit and Belial. These were the messenger armies that were seen by Hanok when they prepared themselves and he was stunned. Uh, when they were getting ready to be released in his vision, if you recall. It's also mentioned there in one of the Thanksgiving hymns in the Dead Sea Scrolls about the time when they stand up to go do their work and judgment in the world and how there will never be a time like it again. But it says, and those in the fourth who are above these are kadosh, or set apart. For in the highest of all dwells the great esteem, in the kadosh kodashim, or they say the most set apart place, right? Far above all kodashim, or set apartness. And in the Shamayim next to it are the messengers of the presence of Yahuwah, who minister and make propitiation to Yahuwah for all the sins of ignorance of the righteous. Now, that might be the seven that are before the presence of our Mashiach, right? The thrones that are mentioned there, it might be different intercessory messengers. These things are not quite clear, but it is spoken of right here in they go over some context and things that they know about. You can feel free to pause and read those as well. I try not to go outside of scripture to find out what these things are. Sometimes they mention things in the Talmud or other writings, which they may not be legitimate, but they also might be holding on to information that they did not want to keep elsewhere. They did accurately record some things when they wanted to remove scriptures. A great example of that is what the Yahudim have in the Talmud about the Day of Atonement and the Lamb's Book of Life and what is in regard to that. They have a tradition that on the first of the seventh month, on Yom Teruah, the three books are opened and you have the days of awe where the people who have unintentionally sinned are making propitiation before the Day of Atonement, and then they afflict themselves by fasting on the Day of Atonement to make propitiation for the sins of ignorance. And that is what's recorded very clearly in the book of Gad the seer. But because Gad the seer's visions pointed out the Mashiach so clearly, those writings were removed, and it was just the information that was kept in their Talmud. So sometimes that might be in other places too. I have no idea about that. So I can't say don't trust anything you ever read there. But you want to go by what you know to be inspired first, and then look for sources secular. It says verse 6 here. And they offered to Yahuwah a sweet smelling savor, a reasonable and bloodless offering. In, sorry, and in the Shamayim below, which would be the fifth one, right, are the messengers who bear the answers to the messengers of the presence of Yahuwah. And in the Shamayim next to this are the thrones and dominions in which always praises are offered to Elohim. Now, when you compare this account, for example, with what you can see in the Dead Sea Scrolls in regard to the temples and the messengers serving in them and praising our Maker in those in each level of the Shamayim, it's not quite the same thing. What you read about in this account here and the vision that you see in the ascension of Yeshayahu is not quite always in line with the details. They're not covering the exact same topics for one. Um, and then again, the information about what you can see in the book of Enoch, when he was taken and changed into like the messengers and brought before our Father, it does not read quite the same way. This is what I'm talking about when you can't be dogmatic. Just what you saw with this writing, there's three different versions. And of these three, they might all be abridgments of something that was much larger beforehand, just like his prayer, where you saw it was just a verse saying that he prayed, and then you can actually see it was an entire paragraph of what happened. So um, we have to be patient with these things and realize that his word is true. Kepha explains that while, and this is also in Ecclesiastics or in Shalomo's writing for Kohelet, in other places that we can hardly, Ezra, fourth Ezra talks about it, we can hardly know the things upon the earth that are right before us. How can we know the things above that we cannot see, touch, feel, taste, or know except through revelation from above? So we should not be overly dogmatic about the things we cannot know for certain, right? But what we can know for certain are the things that are established with multiple witnesses that he says will establish and confirm every matter. And once you have that, and like Kepha says, you've gone through and discussed how these are truly the words of the foreteller, we are to believe them without question. But that's a large litmus test that he's given us to fulfill before it's absolutely required. The thing is, you can prove and do it in a lawful manner almost everything that's in Scripture, just from the Bible And the things that you couldn't know are what he would not hold you accountable for until he returned. The actual, the way his calendar is kept and things of that nature could not have been known. But back on point here. It says, when therefore Yahuwah, and this is talking about after he's named all the different levels of the Shamayim and what goes on there. When therefore Yahuwah looks upon all creation, or all of us, right? The Shamayim and the earth and the abysses are shaken, right? And it says the Shamayim and the earth and the abysses are shaken at the presence of his majesty. But the sons of men, having no perception of these things, sin and provoke the Most High. Now therefore know that Yahuwah shall execute judgment upon the sons of men. And this is the proof for it. And this is all about what happened when our Mashiach came. Because when the rocks are being rent, when he died and gave up his ruach with a great shout, there was an earthquake, right? The rocks were rent, and the sun was quenched for 3 hours at his suffering, and the waters dried up, right? That I don't know of a comparable during his passion that's mentioned, but we know when the waters were dried up with the flood, we know the waters were dried up both with the Red Sea crossing and of the coming of the children into the land with the Jericho. Okay. The fire cowering happened both in the plagues of Egypt and afterwards. It's mentioned in the wisdom of Shalom. Fire might have had an effect again when he was in his passion. It doesn't specifically mention these two, right? And all creation troubled. This is specifically mentioned at his passion, and it's mentioned like when the plagues or wonders were happening in Egypt. This is talked about in what's called the Wisdom of Solomon or the Chokmah Shalomo. It says, and all the creation troubled, and the invisible spirits melting away, and Hades takes spoils through the visitations of the Most High. Our Mashiach wept over them, and he said, because they did not know the time of their visitation, which the visitation is talked about specifically in the exhortation, or it's the two Ruach oath that rule over every man. That's part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I believe it's in the community rule. It goes into detail about the Ruach or the spirit that is in you based on the things that you choose to do, and then what's going to happen to you based on that spirit when he visits. And if you read through that and then you look at his interactions with people when he came in the flesh, you can see, well, this is the spirit that these ones had, this is the spirit that those ones had. And you can see the cause and effect of them. It's a very amazing connection there. But it goes in line with the two ways and the fact that what we choose to think, say, and do have consequences, right? This is in Hades takes spoils, or the grave takes spoils through the visitations of the Most High. Men will be unbelieving and persist in their inequity. And I ask you, is it true? He came, all these things literally happened, right? If you don't remember the spoils that were taken by the grave after his visitation, everyone, you just read the Wars of the Yahudim. You can see what happened to all those that rejected the truth. And when they said, we have no king but Caesar, they got Caesar in all his glory, and they came and destroyed that place. But right here, this was foretold, and that was over 1,000 years before Mashiach came, right? On this account, with punishment shall they be judged. Therefore, the Most High has heard your prayer to separate you from inequity. I don't know what other men have for defining this. If you look at the words in Scripture, they have some interesting ways they're used. But The I Avan or Awen, right, is Ayin Wa Noon. And it has to do with what you perceive and do. So it's what you knowingly do that is wrong. Pesha, transgression, is more of breaking trust. And you can break trust with a neighbor, you can break trust with a spouse, you can break trust with a colleague. It's not exactly the same as a sin. Sin is to miss the mark. These are the simple meaning of it. The picture in there is why he had to come and die. But that's the in the Hebrew letters and the pictures that you can see. The point of inequity, though, this is what you knowingly do that is wrong. Now, even our inequity is ignorant sin. When we come to belief, he forgives us our sins of ignorance. And we've talked about it before. His idea of what that means when you don't go beyond what is written and you don't just make up the things or the definitions. The scriptures, the recognitions of Clement and other places define these things. If you truly knew the future judgment, you would never sin. But it's because of ignorance of that that people do evil things, whether knowingly or not. Inequity must be corrected. It must be corrected either in this life or in the age to come. There is no option for otherwise because you're doing it with knowledge. You're intentional. That's the problem. And it says in there, you alone, Yaakov, have I known of all the people of the earth. Therefore, I punish you for your inequities. That's the thing. When you know the truth and choose to sin. Now, here's the difference. If you've been immersed in his name and been given of the gifts of the Ruach, and you've had manifest miracles that have been happening, and you turn from that to apostatize again, there is no forgiveness. There is no going back to that. That the example we have, it's mentioned in Hebrews and in other places, but the example that we have is in Simon the magician. He was a wizard, if you will. When he came to the truth, he became immersed and became a taught one. He later on went away from that again, and there was no chance at reconciliation. But that's for a different time as well. We will get those, we'll cover those more as we get to that timeline. For our purposes here, he's going to separate the sons of Louis from inequity, which is knowingly doing the things that are wrong. And it's not exactly right away if you pay attention to what happens in their history. But watch his family, and you can see these things happen. So to separate you from inequity, and that you should become to him a son and a servant and a minister of his presence. So for him to become like our Mashiach, right? It says, what about not going apostate, just being a drunk and partaking in perversion? Well, now see, that's the thing. We have, and I know what you're talking about here. You have to say, are you immersed in the name of Yahushua, right? Are any of us alive today properly instructed and immersed so that we are without sin? Because everyone during those times, the evil inclination was removed from them, and they were a type of the first fruits of the age to come, like Jacob explains. But as far as I'm aware, they were all killed off by the 7th century AD as part of the our body being put to death, right? That is the thing that's going to be resurrected in his body before he returns. The willing, not willingly doing evil, right? But I don't know if the evil inclination is going to be removed until he removes it. When he returns, the first resurrection, those that are made like messengers will never taste death at all. They will have that. But I can't say it's going to happen to anyone before that time that we're living through. It's possible, but we have to be immersed and do things according to what is enjoined in the apostolic constitutions. And it says in there, if you die as an instructed, which is The only expectation that I have right now, or that anyone here might have right now, if you die as an instructed, not in sin, that will be counted as a more pure immersion than just being immersed in water because you truly die with him. But there's two things to keep in mind. We don't know when we're going to die, and that means that we have to live without sin now. We have to fight that evil inclination, not that it's not going to be there, but that we have to overcome it through the word and not do sin. Because if you're doing a sin, you're transgressing. So if you know you're not supposed to not be drunk and you do it anyways and you die in it, that's a horrible thing. I would be terrified. And if you kept the future judgment in front of you, you would not do that. That's just an obvious thing, right? That's why it says in the Epistle of Barnabas to always keep the future judgment before your eyes. This is why believers are enjoined in the apostolic constitutions and elsewhere to pray 7 times in a day. At cock crowing is the last one, but you have at dawn or sunrise is the first. At the third hour, because that's when he was convicted. At the sixth hour, because that's when he was impaled. At the ninth hour, because that was when he gave up his ruach. And then at sunset, and then last light, and then cock crowing is the seventh time. But if you're doing that on a daily basis, if you're honestly trying to just thank him for these times like he wants you to, and keeping in mind why, you're going to have that future judgment always before your face, and it's going to compel you in your conscience not to do things that are going to cause you to be there. Another way of looking at it is you're never alone. And I tried to explain this to my children the other day. It's a very liberating thing when you realize if your parents are always watching, are you going to do things that are going to get you in trouble? Will you consciously do what will cause you to get a spanking or grounded right in front of your father and mother when they're standing there watching you? Of course not. Now, if you just kept in mind the fact that you cannot hide from him, he knows your thoughts, he knows your words, he knows what you're going to do before you do it. You can hide nothing. He's always watching and you will be corrected. Would you do things that are wrong? Of course not. But that's why the enemy distracts us and keeps us not thinking about these things so that we do evil and we're following his camp. But that's part of it. The idea is using the word, standing on truth, and abstaining to cut off the means of what would cause us to sin and remove it from you so that you can die not sinning and be his. Otherwise, I don't know what we can do as believers today, honestly, unless there's someone that is immersed in his name that has the Ruach that's been doing miracles and not sinning. Remember, it's the one who is able to uphold the entire body who is not sinning with his mouth. So if you can not speak or do any things that cause stumbling, then you are able to also uphold the entire body. And that just means that you're able, like Yahushua, to not cause an offense and help reconcile those that are at odds with one another, right? To be a stand in, to be one who stands in the gap of the breach of his people, like Moshe did. But here we go. It says, on account of this, with punishment shall they be judged. Therefore, the Most High has heard your prayer to separate you from iniquity, and that you should become to him a son, and a servant, and a minister of his presence. The light of knowledge shall you light up in Jacob, and as the sun shall you be to all the seed of Israel. And there shall be given to you a barakah, and to all your seed. Just to recap there, that's also why it mentions very clearly in Yahukhanan's epistles that if you see someone sinning a sin not unto death, you can pray for them, and they will be forgiven their sin that is not unto death. I do not say that you pray to them for a sin unto death, right? And you got to ask yourself, what is a sin unto death? Everything in the Torah everything in the common law or the scriptures, the right rulings and the Ten Commandments that say, thou shalt not, or you shall die. Those are sins unto death. Dishonoring your parents, committing treason, murder, adultery, fornication, kidnapping, and bearing false witness so as to, if that was to cause the death of another, that would cause your death. Those are 7 instances where death is required, and you're not to pray for someone that you see sinning in that manner. You're to tell them to repent, right? But there might be other instances as well. There might be some that are not offenses that are lead to death. Those ones you should pray for people for, and they will be forgiven. It's what our Mashiach was doing, okay? All right, it says, in the light of knowledge shall you light up in Yaakov, and as the sun shall you be to all the seed of Yisrael. The light of the sun is like our Mashiach, who is the light of knowledge that enlightens the heart of every man, where you walk as in the day and not in darkness, because you have the light of life and you can see where the pitfalls are, right? These things are explained in different ways throughout the scriptures and in the other writings that we have. This is, and there shall be given to you a baraka, and to all your seed, until Yahuwah shall visit all the nations in his tender mercies forever. Now you can say, well, was that until he came the first time or until he comes the second time? We know until he came the first time, the Levitical kahuna was with his seed literally. And we know that until he returns, the gift of Elohim is not to be repented of. Those that were of the sons of Louis are able to always join to go follow and serve him, like it says in the scriptures. And you have an example of that in Barnabas himself, who was a son of Louis that became an apostle because he went and joined them to do so, instantly going in to do that. Um, and so that's until he returns. It's actually fulfilled in both ways. Although with the renewed covenant, it's under the Melchizedek order and the injunctions that he's given when he came. And it says, and therefore there have been given to you counsel and comprehension, that you might instruct your sons concerning this, because they that barak him shall be Baruch, and they that curse him shall perish. And here's another thing we haven't really gone into detail about, but because the promises were going to come through Louis and Yahuda, because the promises and the truth was coming through Abraham, if he was Baruch by them, they would be Baruch, and if he was cursed by them, they'd be cursed. And everyone to whom is a partaker of the covenant and the truth is in him, that becomes a true. You can see that it was the same with Yahusuf. They never said that directly in the Bible concerning him whatsoever, but because he was serving our Maker, whenever he was with anyone, they prospered when he was prospering, right? They gave everything into his hands because everything he did was successful. So you can still see how that was playing out. And while men might recognize it and take advantage of it, the righteous men don't always have the same regard. That was part of what our Mashiach said, that the wicked are more clever to do evil than the wise are clever to do good in this generation, right? It says, and thereupon the messenger opened to me the gates of Shamayim, and I saw the set apart temple or Hikel, and upon a throne of esteem the Most High. And he said to me, Louis, I have given you the baraka of the kahuna until I come and sojourn in the midst of Yisrael. Now, this was typified literally when he came. When Moshe came and he came to dwell in their midst, that was when the kahuna was being brought to the renewed covenant times, if you will, as a type and shadow. And you can see that when Moshe first called the sons up there to offer, it was the firstborn of all the tribes that were giving sacrifices. After the golden calf incident, it was all the sons of Louis that were put in place of the firstborn that opens every womb. But right here, it was the truth in context that it was going to be the type, it was going to be replaced, but because they transgressed and because it was already foreordained as a type that way, Louis was given it as a people and not just him individually passed down to his sons, but as his tribe in the wilderness at that time, which we will get to shortly. We're going to be reading the Testament or the book of Exodus after we get through with these testaments here, and then two more that are in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Then, verse 3, then the messenger brought me down to the earth and gave me a shield and a sword and said to me, execute vengeance on Shechem because of Dinah, your sister, and I will be with you because Yahuwah has sent me. And I destroyed at that time the sons of Hamor, as it is written in the Shamayim tables. So you see, he knew that it was ordained that way. He was commanded from above to do so, but it was not seen well by his father. That was part of the reason why he was passed over for the earthly baraka or the birthright uh, double portion, but he still got the preeminence of the kahuna by our creator because it would have been falling on him lawfully. I think we talked about that before already too. If you don't remember, there's a gentleman that did some videos on the lost tribes and he really goes into detail about the birthright. He does a very good job of it. So I want to give him the credit that's due, and I'll share his videos in the description here for anyone that's interested. But right here it says, and I said to him, I pray you, Yahuwah, tell me your, or I pray you, Master, that messenger that's with him, right? Tell me your name that I may call upon you in the day of tribulation. And he said, I am the messenger who intercedes for the nation of Yisrael, that they may not be smitten utterly. For every evil Ruach oath attacks it. Now, this messenger could be our Mashiach, the messenger that goes before them, right? There's a type and picture. We've talked about it before, but as the Father is the creator of all, and it's like he left his to go save that which was lost, he put over them our Mashiach, which was the world, right? He put our Mashiach over all things. And as our Mashiach, the great shepherd of the sheep, put his down to go save that which was lost, he put over his people, the righteous remnant of his people that are not sinning, Mikael, the one who is like El, over his people, just like he was put over the people of his father, right? So it's a hand in glove kind of thing you can see there. Which one's being spoken of distinctly here, I can't tell you exactly, but that's the way that's set up. And you can see that fully when you look at what's in Daniel, when you read what's in the Testament or the Shepherd of Hermas in regard to the willow, the parable of the willow tree and Mikael and whatnot. So this could be our Mashiach speaking, or it could be Mikael that was over the righteous remnant only. I believe that this was our Mashiach based on what else is being spoken of here and who's talking, because it was the Most High that was sitting on his throne, that then talking about the messenger who is an intercessor. So he's the only intercessor or mediator between Elohim and man, right? It says, and when I was going to my father, I found a brazen shield, wherefore also the name of a mountain is a Aspis, right? Which is near Jabal, to the south of Ablia or Abila. And I kept these words in my heart. And after this, I counseled my father and Reuben, my brother, to bid the sons of Hamor not to be circumcised, for I was jealous because of the abomination which they had wrought on my sister. And I slew Shechem first, and Shimon slew Hamor. And after this, my brothers came and smote that city with the edge of the sword. And my father heard these things and was wroth, and he was grieved in that they had received the circumcision, and after that had been put to death. And in his baraka, or his blessings, he looked amiss upon us, meaning Louis and Shimon. He looked amiss, but it was for the purposes of the Almighty that these things happen. If you look at the prophetic picture, if you will, Louis and Shimon were scattered amongst the 12 tribes, not to be of their own body. Louis literally all throughout them had different cities and then was spread everywhere based on the families and where they went. And you can look that up in the where they're divvying up the lands and the cities of refuge and whatnot. The sons of Shimon, though, while they were supposed to be scattered out throughout, it says that they were mostly encompassed or they were enveloped within Yahuda's land or allotment. And that's a type and a picture, if you can just look at it. Scripture says by Shaul that they are not Yahudim, or they're not Jews who are Jews outwardly, but they are so inwardly. And he doesn't mean that they're not literally the seed of Abraham. He's speaking of the prophetic comprehension. The Yahudim, for the purposes of Scripture, or looking at it in the foretelling sense, are those who confess, acknowledge, and praise Yahuwah. While the rest of Yisrael went apostate, they stayed true. That's the picture. Of those, of the ones who confess, acknowledge, and praise Yahuwah, a body within them are those who Shimon, hear, believe, and do. So it's even just a remnant within. It's a picture within a picture, if you can see that. While you have those joined unto him spread all over, you have those who hear, believe, and do only within the body of the Yahudim, those who praise, acknowledge, and confess Yahuwah. Which means that while you can have some that confess, not acknowledge, and praise him, they're not of him. And that's seen in the son of Salak, who was the only surviving child of the Canaanite woman, which was the son of Yahuda and not of the kingdom and could not be in covenant, if you remember with the children of Canaan and what was in store for them. So just trying to keep all these things in mind. You can see how they're playing out and how they all are interconnected that way, right? But it says, "For we sinned because we had done this thing against his will, and he was sick on that day." Remember, one of the things that is a sin causing death is to dishonor your parents. Now, while this was not an open dishonor in that capacity, making their father sick was considered a sin, or at least that was considered a sin to him. The other one where they affronted or they offended the affections of their father on the Day of Atonement, right? The day before in the evening, they came with the bloody coat and asked, do you know who this is? And they got him to believe that his son Yahusuf had died by wild beasts. And he mourned all that night, and then he mourned all that day and for a year because they had offended the affections of their father. It was attributed to them as a great sin. And they were perpetually supposed to mourn on that day for what had happened. And that's the memorial of the Day of Atonement that you can read about in the book of Yobelim as well. This is, "But I saw that the sentence of Elohim was for evil upon Shechem, for they sought to do to Sarah and Rebekah as they had done to Dinah our sister, but Yahuwah prevented them." Now, this is saying that these people, the Shechemites, right, the Canaanites that lived there, were evil. They regularly would kidnap or steal men's wives and defile them, or their daughters, and then try to marry them, kill off those men. It was a normal thing. But Yahuwah prevented them from doing that to Sarah and Rebekah. You might ask why? What was the difference between them? I would stipulate there was no idolatry in their camps. There was no hidden sins or problems that were going on, unlike when Jacob returned and Dinah was defiled. Something to keep in mind there. And if you recall, after that incident, before the seventh month, when they're going to go keep his vow, he tells them to purify themselves, to repent, and to put away all the idolatry of the things causing them problems. And that's when those idols were destroyed and broken up. But before then, it was there. And what was prevented by Elohim before was allowed then. Just like the destruction of the city before prevented, or the Hikkel being kept preserved from men doing things to defile it, and then having it destroyed because then he was not protecting it. Okay. He's not unrighteous in anything. There are reasons why these things happen, and it's meant to teach us. This is, and they persecuted Abraham our father when he was a stranger, and they vexed his flocks when they were big with young, and Ebleen, who was born in his house, they most shamefully handled. And thus they did to all strangers, taking away their wives by force, and they banished them. But the wrath of Yahuwah came upon them to the uttermost. And I said to my father Jacob, by you will Yahuwah destroy the Canaanim, and will give their land to you and to your seed after you. This is another one of those things, and one of the things I want to keep in mind when our Mashiach, or when anyone gives a foretelling through the inspiration of the Ruach, and they make a statement, it's by you, it's not just, oh, it's going to be his sons later on. It was literally by him, and it was also by his children in a larger capacity. Literally fulfilled then when they had their battles where he got his extra portion with his bow that he gave to Yahusuf, but you don't find any of those battles recorded in the Bible. And then later on with the conquests, later with Yahushua, all the way through to the times of Shalomo and the uprooting and servitude of those Canaanites to the fullest, right? And then even later, where it mentions that there's not going to be any of certain types before the great day of judgment. The point is, you can see it echoes, but the first fulfillment was literally by Jacob in his own person with his own sons fighting these people. We already read that, some of the accounts for that in the Testament of Yahuda, if you remember. The verse 2, it says, for from this day forward shall Shechem be called the city of imbeciles. For as a man mocks a fool, so did we mock them. Because also they wrought folly in Yisrael by defiling my sister. And we departed and came to Bethel. And there again, and remember, they came to Bethel to keep the vow with Jacob. It says, and there again I saw a vision, even as the former, after we had spent there 70 days. And I saw 7 men in white raiment, saying unto me, arise, put on a robe of the kahuna and the crown of righteousness, and the breastplate of comprehension, and the garment of truth, and the plate of belief, and the turban of the head, which they translate as a mitre in other places, and the ephod of foretelling. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this on the chat, or if anyone listening to these videos, but the Umin and Thumin, right? The light and truth, or light and perfection that was in the ephod was used to foretell. They would ask questions, and based on how the light would display on it, they'd have yes or no answers, or they'd know which tribe would go up, or different things to do based off the ephod. And that's why it's called the ephod of foretelling there. Dawid would also consult these things before he would do pretty much anything, any battle or whatever. He'd always inquire of Yahuwah, right? But they don't distinctly say how that was. Sometimes that was getting revelation from the Kohen or a foreteller, and sometimes that was using the ephod, or the little breastplate with the gems, the stones with the names of the 12 tribes inscribed, right? It had a type of the sun and moon on the shoulders. The whole depiction of the garments of the Kohen was like the creation account. and the Elohim on the head in the Shamayim up above where there's blue, the the belt and the sash around the earth and the colors there being about the elements and the world that encloses it. It's all a type of the creation, and you can find the details on that explained in the Antiquities of the Yahudim by Josephus, but it's alluded to in what's called the Wisdom of Solomon or the Hokmah Shalomo. It says, and they severally carried these things and put them on me and said unto me, from henceforth become you a Kohen of Yahuwah, and you and your seed forever. And the first anointed me with Kodesh oil and gave to me the staff of judgment. The second washed me with pure water and fed me with bread and wine, even the most Kodesh things, and clad me with a set apart and splendorous robe. The third clothed me with a linen vestment like an ephod. The fourth put round me a girdle like unto purple. The fifth gave me a branch of rich olive. The sixth placed a crown on my head. The seventh placed on my head a diadem of kahuna or priesthood, and filled my hands with incense that I might serve as Kohen to Yahuwah Elohim. And they said to me, Louis, your seed shall be divided into 3 offices, for a sign of the esteem of Yahuwah who is to come. And the first portion shall be great, yea, greater than it shall be none, which is the high Kohen. Right. The second shall be in the kahuna, and the third shall be called by a new name, because a king shall arise in Yahudah and shall establish a new kahuna after the fashion of the Gentiles or nations to all the nations. Whether the first, the highest, the greatest given to them is as high Kohanim, right? The next is as the kahuna, or you have every one of the sons of Louis that could serve in the priesthood, if you will. They could serve in the temple. They weren't all given to offer sacrifices, but they were all given to serve, right? And then you have the third that would be called by a new name. Um, this could be alluding to the renewed covenant times, and that they could be emissaries or teachers or whatever. But I don't know if that was legitimately how it was to begin with. If you recall, there was 3 sons of Louis, and the 3 branches got 3 different jobs. It divvied up after that while they were in the wilderness with the tabernacle. The only a few got to be the high Kohen, the son of Kohath of Aharon specifically. And then you had the sons of Kohath and the Kohathites that were keepers or guardians of the things of the Hikkel when it was being transported. And then you had the other 2 that were doing different duties of guarding different things of the witness tabernacle. After they got into the temple or Hikkel, they had different positions. They would be guards for the doors and the gates, the keepers of the treasuries, and the ordinance of the kahuna, right? There'd be teachers and ministers, judges throughout the land, and different capacities there. So whether or not it was paralleling like that, or this is talking about the renewed covenant exclusively, this is one of those things where it might be abridged from what it was originally saying. We just don't have the full knowledge of it. Okay. Many times people see things like this and they say, well, that's a Christian interpolation. But that's because they reject, you can see they talk about it, Christian interpolation, but that's because they reject foreknowledge. I believe that our Creator can do anything He wants, including tell the future. All right, so right here it says, and His presence is beloved. Maybe the first mention of Him as beloved, right? As a foreteller of the Most High, of the seed of our father, or of Abraham, our father. Therefore, every desirable thing in Israel shall be for you and for your seed, and you shall eat everything fair to look upon, the first fruits, the best of everything. And it was the unblemished things only, right? They always got the fairest portion was given to the sons of Louis and the ones that served our Creator. But there's a double-edged sword there. There's a lot of things that we don't think about. They were highly esteemed, but they were also highly judged for what they were going to do. They they had to eat, required to eat perpetually of those lamb offerings morning and evening as a type of what was going to happen with our Mashiach that they were going to be partaking of, right? I don't know if they were aware of that beforehand, but it's definitely a picture you can see afterwards. It says, and the table of Yahuwah shall be your apportion, and some of them shall be high kahuna, or high priests, and judges and scribes, for by their mouth shall the set apart place be guarded. And when I awoke, I comprehended that this dream was like the first dream, and I hid this also in my heart and told it not to any man upon the earth. We had covered that a little bit before. When Yahusuf had dreams about himself and he shared it with his brothers, there was envy and jealousy, and there was things conspired against him because of it. So when Louis was being given these visions, he just kept it tucked in. He didn't went off and say anything. They still happened though. Okay. And after 2 days, I and Yahuda went up with our father, Jacob, to Yitzhak, our father's father. And this is recorded in the book of Yobelim as a type and a foreshadow of the things to come, right? It was Louis being given the kahuna and Yahuda being given the kingdom. A type of the renewed covenant times, though, where those that are joined unto him were going to be made like kings and priests that live and reign with him for 1,000 years. Okay? It says, and when my father's father, Baruch me, according to all the words of the visions which I had seen, and he would not come with us to Bethel. Here's another part. Um, Here, we're about to read it right here. This part right here is another part that's an abridgment. I'll show you real quickly, but we don't have to read the whole thing when we get to it. It says, and when we came to Bethel, my father Jacob saw a vision concerning me, that I should be their Kohen unto Elohim. In the book of Yobelim, which we will get to, it records that he numbered everything that he had, gave a tenth of all. He was separating a tenth of everything that he had in his possessions. And when he started counting from his children, from Benjamin in the womb upward, the lot fell to Louis to be of the portion of Yahuwah, and that's why he became the Kohen. And he rose up early in the morning and paid tithes of all to Yahuwah through me. And so we came to Hebron to dwell there. And Yitzhak called me continually to put me in remembrance of the law of Yahuwah, even as the messenger of Yahuwah showed unto me. And he taught me the law of the kahuna, of sacrifices, whole burnt offerings, first fruits, free will offerings, shalom offerings. Each day he was instructing me and was busied on my behalf before Yahuwah. And right here, real quick, I want to show you. He's talking about those offerings, right? If I can find it. Sorry about that. I don't want to cut off too much, but I want to show you that there's a lot missing, right? So you can see that he had a vision, and he's talking about there's going to be choice first fruits of the whole to eat, but during the reign of the sword there is only strife. And these are things talking about in his life, the things that are going to happen to him in the kahuna. So how there's going to be benefit and sorrow. Sometimes he'd be fed, sometimes he wouldn't be. Sometimes he would be right, and sometimes his children would go apostate. And we don't see any of that one there, right? Then it talks about how he went to his father Yitzhak, and he was Baruch by him, okay? And how he was ranked first at the head of the kahuna, and to me, of all his sons, he gave the gift of a tithe of all. So it kind of reads a little bit more. There's a little bit more offered there, and there's a little bit more said, right? And then it mentions that he was making the sacrifices in Bethel, and we left and lived in our great grandfather Abraham's place with Yitzhak, our grandfather. So it doesn't mention that they went to live there, although in the book of Yobelim, he is told to go do so. And then you can see here that they actually did. Now, this is the part where Yaakov or Yitzhak is instructing him. And I wanted just to show you a little bit of how much is missing. So when Yitzhak, our grandfather, saw us all, he greeted us joyfully. When he recognized that I had become a Kohen to El Elyon, Yahuwah of Shamayim, he began to teach me authoritatively the Kohen way of life. And he said to me, Louis, carefully avoid, my son, all ritual impurity and every kind of sin. Your way of life is to be more strict than all other men. So now, my son, I will show you the proper way for you to live, not withholding from you anything you need to know about the kahuna or the Kohen priestly way of life. First, carefully avoid, my son, all impure lewdness and every kind of improper sexual act. You must marry a woman from my clan, so as not to defile your seed with harlots. Because you are a set apart seed, and set apart is your seed as the set apart temple. This is also explained in later times where Aharon is considered the Kadosh Kodashim, him and his sons, like the temple, a physical that they were in, but it's representative of the one not made with hands, those that are close and drawn unto him, right? That's the picture. And it says, and because you are considered a set apart Kohen to all the seed of Abraham, you are close to Elohim and close to all his set apart messengers. So purify your flesh from every impurity of any man. And then it goes into detail about how you arise and you bathe and you dress and you wash your garments before you do any sacrifices, and then you wash. And then it goes into more detail about examining the logs and the wood before you would offer them, and what kinds of wood are fitting to be used, only 12, right? And then it goes into detail about after you've found the wood that's fitting and you place it in a certain manner, you use exact measures of certain amounts of salt, of certain amounts of oil, of certain amounts of incense, and all of them by measure for each amount, depending on what kind of animal. And that also, if you can see here, goes into great detail, this entire thing. You guys can pause and look at it on your own. This is all about the different offerings that he would have to do. Every nuance about these things that are literally done to please the Most High according to his word, so that you're not going beyond what is written, right? And none of that is in this Greek version. It just skips all of that going into well, we'll cover it right here. But I wanted you to see that there are some things that we just don't have in the translations that have come down, that we can't be dogmatic and say, oh, well, it must not exist, right? But right here, it says, take for your, and this will cover some of that, but you'll see that it does not nearly cover all of the information that he had there. It says, beware of the spirit of fornication. That is unlewd, unnatural sexual acts, not with your wife, just sleeping with anybody you want, is a fornication. Doesn't matter how much you might care about them or what you call it. It is what it is, and that is the main contribution to what caused the flood. That's what scripture tells us, right? For this shall continue and shall be, and shall by your seed pollute the set apart place. We find that the some of that happening in the time of Ezra, where the sons of Louis could not go in to serve because their legitimacy was not, was not established. Take therefore to yourself a wife without blemish or pollution, while yet you are young, or while you are yet young, right? And while yet you are young. Said that right the first time. And not of the race of strange nations. Of the 12 sons of Jacob, Louis was the only one to go back to Armenia to take a wife, just like his forefathers did. And before entering into the Kodesh place, bathe. And when you offer the sacrifice, wash. And again, when you finish the sacrifice, wash. Of 12 trees having leaves, offer to Yahuwah as Abraham taught me also. Just one sentence for all that information, the list of trees and to look for rot and worms and all of that, right? All of that's missing. And of every clean beast and bird, offer a sacrifice to Yahuwah. This might be the earliest second witness to clean and unclean animals that are mentioned anywhere. The first reference is in the flood account, where they are to get 7 of every clean and 2, 7 pairs of every clean and 2 pairs of every unclean animal. Says, and of all your first fruits and of wine offer the first as a sacrifice to Yahuwah Elohim. And every sacrifice you shall salt with salt. Now, therefore, observe. The other one gives you the exact measurements of salt for each type, whether it's a bull, goat, lamb, or whatever. Okay. But possibly because they weren't doing sacrifices anymore and they didn't think it was relevant, possibly because the information was missing. I don't know, but they just did not write it all accurately anymore. This very phenomenon is something that we're about to see right in the book of Exodus. I'm pointing these things out here because it might seem like it's novel. You can see there's a huge sections missing, but this isn't new, and it's also found in the Bible. The book of Exodus being a primary example where it's just completely butchered. They take out section after section just because it's seemingly redundant, but we'll get there. It says, now therefore observe whatsoever I command you, children, for whatsoever things I have heard from my fathers, I have declared unto you. And behold, I am clear from your unrighteousness and transgression, which you shall commit in the end of the ages against the deliverer of the world, Mashiach, acting unrighteously, deceiving Yisrael, and stirring up against it great evils from Yahuwah. And this is exactly what his children did. The chief Kohanim conspired, just like Aharon, when the children in the wilderness said, make us a mighty one to go before us. He didn't fight it. He went and made a golden calf, and he said, here's a festival to Yahuwah for you to keep, right? That type was played out in his children that killed our Mashiach, okay? That was the foreshadowing of those kind of things. It wasn't all the sons of Louis that did that, by the way. It was only the chief Kohanim, right? Many of the sons of Louis and the Kohanim turned to the belief afterwards. It mentions clearly in the book of Acts. But it's a continuing here. And you shall deal lawlessly together with Yisrael, so he shall not bear with Yerushalayim because of your wickedness. But the veil of the Hekel or temple shall be rent so as not to cover your shame. I didn't really get what that meant before, but when our Mashiach gave up his Ruach, if you remember, it says that the veil of the Hekel was torn from top to bottom in two. And when that was happened, everyone could behold inside of it that the Ark of the Covenant wasn't there. And that was not covering their shame anymore, if you will. There were other things in regard to that as well, but that was one of the things that came to mind. And you shall be scattered as captives among the Gentiles, and shall be for a reproach and for a curse there. What happened with the sons of Louis, a great body of them, and what they've done after this time is also foretold. They were with Dan, working against our Mashiach, persecuting Yahusuf, right? And a great many of, you might find a great many Catholic priests today are literally sons of Louis. It says, for the house which Yahuwah shall choose shall be called Yerushalayim, as is contained in the book of Hanok or Enoch the righteous. Therefore, and that is getting back into where he was here in that other book, right here at the bottom. So all that section was missed, right? All right, sorry about that. I wanted to make sure I got that correct. So, and now you can see right here, this is Louis' children and later in life. I want to read it from this section because it has the etymology of the name for, I believe, Amram, that is not in the Greek version. It says, now when 4 weeks of years in my life had passed, when I was 28, I took a wife from the stock of my great-grandfather Abraham, Milcah, the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Laban, my mother's brother. She became pregnant by me and bore a first son, and I called his name Gershom or Gresham, for I said, my descendants shall be homeless in the land where they are born. And indeed, we are considered homeless in this land today. And in particular, his children had no inheritance in the land. That was a continual possession. All those that are sons of Louis or those that are ministers to him, they're not supposed to have any possession or big things or stake in the world today. That's still true. And concerning this child, I saw in my vision that both he and his descendants would be removed from the high kahuna. I was 30 years old. Oh, sorry about that. I was 30 years old when he was born. It was in the 10th month on the, it doesn't say, towards sunset. So it doesn't mention what day he was born, but it was towards sunset. And these things are significant if you pay attention to them and who's given what, with where the sun is in relation to him, because he was given the sun, right? Once again, she conceived by me at the proper time fitting for women, and I called his name Kohath. I called his name Kohath, and I saw that all the people would gather to him, and that the high kahuna over all Yisrael would be his. In the 34th year of my life, he was born in the first month, on the first day of the month, toward sunrise. So he was born on the exact same day that Louis was. All right. Once again, I was with her, and she bore me a third son, and I called his name Merari, because his birth was very distressing, Mar, to me. For when he was born, he was dying. And it was very bitter, Marir, to me, indeed, that he should die. So I appealed and prayed for him, and it was bitter, mirar experience. In the 40th year of my life, he was born in the third month. Now, that could be the 15th of the third month. It might not be. It doesn't specifically say there. But the third month, his third child was with bitterness and appeared to be dying. So there's a significance there. And it says, once again, I was with her and she conceived and bore me a daughter. I gave her the name Jochebed, Yachebed, right? Which is his kabod or his esteem. I said when she was born to me, for esteem she is born to me, Jochebed, right? For the honor of Yisrael. In the 64th year of my life, she was born on the first day of the 7th month, like the Yom Teruah, okay? And you can see in his life a little microcosm of who's born when and how that's playing out, and all of them being of the truth. This is types and pictures for us to look at. There's a whole bunch more involved in this stuff. I don't have all the answers for you right off the top of my head, but I'm trying to just point them out. And it's something that we can dig into more. Or you can, I can, but it's definitely worth looking at. Okay. It says, it says, on the first day of the 7th month after we had entered Mitzrayim or Egypt, right? In the 16th year, he brought us into the land of Egypt. At that time, the daughters of my brothers were given to my sons when considered worthy to bear them children. It says, the names of the sons of Gershom, Libni, and Shimni. The names of the sons of Kohath, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uziel. The names of the sons of Merari, Mali, and Mushai. Now Amram took a wife, my daughter Jochebed, while I was alive, in the 94th year of my life. I had called him Amram when he was born, because when he was born I said, this one shall bring the people out of the land of Mitzrayim, and so shall be called exalted people, Amarama. That Ram means exalted, and Am is people. So Ram is exalted people, right? Amarama. On one day were born both he and Jochebed, my daughter. When I was 18, I was brought into the land of Canaan, and I was 18 when I killed Shechem and eliminated those who commit crimes. I was 19 years old when I became a Kohen, and I was 28 when I took a wife for myself, and I was 48 when Elohim brought us into the land of Mitzrayim. I lived 89 years in Egypt. In all, I lived 137 years, and I saw my descendants to the third generation before I died. Now, he might not have said it exactly like that. If you recall, all of the writings were destroyed at the captivity of Babylon and rewritten by Ezra and 5 scribes. So any type of writing where it talks about Moshe going up and dying in his own writing is because of that, right? The things that we have were reconstructed for us from what was originally given by inspiration. And that was in 4th Ezra. I believe you can read about that. So continuing here, it says, in the 118th year of my life, the year that my brother Yahusuf died, there's a parallel there. When Yahusuf was 110, Louis was 118. If Yahusuf was 12 when Benjamin was born, then we know that Louis would have been 20. Okay, so that just gives you a little more. We can know these things and look at the numbers and see how they play out when we have time. But these are where you get the little bits of information that you can see what can help you to figure those things out, right? You can either use inductive or deductive reasoning to help decide these things. It's for a different time, but the point is you get little bits of information here and there and you hold on to them until you can fit it all and it makes sense. But we don't just throw it away or don't just hold on to it and say, well, this must be until you can prove them and you're assured that it's accurate, right? But either way, in the year that Yahusuf died, I called together my sons and their sons, and I began to command them everything that was in my mind. I raised my voice and said to my sons, listen to your father Louis's speech. Pay heed to the precepts of Elohim's friend. I will instruct you, my sons. I will tell you what is right, my dears, or my beloved, right? The whole of your actions must be right. So may goodness or tovim remain forever with you. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. All right. Forever with you. And the right, it breaks off here. So we don't know how much is missing of that line or how many words are. But it says, and the right, it breaks off a blessed yield. Whoever sows goodness will reap goodness, but whoever sows evil, his seed will return to him. So now, my sons, teach writing and discipline and wisdom to your children, so that Hokmah may be their perpetual honor. For the one who learns Hokmah or wisdom shall have honor through it. But whoever disdains Hokmah becomes an object of scorn and contempt. Consider my sons, my brother Yahusuf, who teaches writing and wise discipline, for esteem and majesty, and he advises kings. It breaks off. Do not ignore the learning of Hokmah or wisdom, for every man who learns wisdom, his days will be long, and his reputation will grow in every land and nation that he goes to. He will be like a brother there, and will be recognized, and will not seem like a foreigner or a half-breed. For all of them will give him honor, because all will want to learn from his Hokmah, or wisdom. His friends will be many, his well-wishers numerous, and they will make him to sit in the chair of honor, to hear his words of Hokmah. So Hokmah is a great treasure of honor for those who know it, and a fine trove for all who possess it. If mighty kings come with many people, and an army, horsemen, and many chariots with them, and if they seize their wealth of lands and nations, plundering everything in them, they still could not plunder the storehouses of Hokmah, nor could they find its hidden riches. They could not enter its gates, nor could they break down its walls, right? Or its doors rather. Nor that could they overcome or overrun its walls, and then it breaks off. It says, would they see her treasures? The treasure breaks off. You can see right here, he's talking about how the benefits of wisdom surpasses anything. It can't be taken or plundered by enemies. You can't be robbed of it. It's going to be your friend and a counsel to you, a help and a stay everywhere you go. Sorry, I have one more trying to find the right spot. Yeah, it goes off right here, and you see it keeps breaking off. There's a lot more that's in fragments here. So we're going to go ahead and flip back to the other one real quick to finish it. But I just wanted you to see there is quite a bit that is in that one that we just don't have anymore. So we read about this part about Merari and his children, and then it talks about his children and how they took sons and daughters. And then he recapped right here that he died, or Yahusuf died in his 118th year of his life. So it says, and now, my children, I command you, fear Yahuwah your Elohim with your whole heart, and walk in simplicity according to all his law. And do you also teach your children letters, that they may have comprehension all their life, reading unceasingly the Torah of Elohim, or the law of Elohim. For every one that knows the law of Yahuwah shall be honored, and shall not be a stranger whithersoever he goes. Yea, many friends shall he gain more than his parents, and many men shall desire to serve him, and to hear the law from his mouth. Work righteousness, therefore, my children, upon the earth, that you may have it as a treasure in the Shamayim, and sow good things in your souls, that you may find them in your life. But if you sow evil things, you shall reap every trouble and affliction. Get Hokmah in the fear of Elohim with diligence, and, for though there be a leading into captivity, and cities and lands be destroyed, and gold and silver, and every possession perish, the Hokmah of the wise not can take away, save the blindness of unrighteousness and the callousness of sin. So that will hopefully help people to start comprehending why some just don't get it. Unrighteousness causes blindness. Literally, idolatry. Adultery, spiritual adultery is idolatry. When you put something before your maker and his words in your life and you serve it or them, it causes blindness and callousness that comes from sin. To no longer be compassionate or to no longer have care about when you're offensive too. It's like becoming hardened. What you get when you work and your hands become calloused, they become unfeeling and toughened. But you don't want to do that to your soul because that it comes from unrepentant sin and it causes blindness. Or sorry, it takes away wisdom. Continuing, for if one keep oneself from these evil things, then even among his enemies shall Hokmah be esteemed to him, and in a strange country a fatherland, and in the midst of foes shall prove a friend. Whosoever teaches noble things and does them shall be enthroned with kings, as was also Yahusef my brother. And now, my children, I have learned from the writing of Hanok that in the end you will transgress against Yahuwah, stretching out hands to all wickedness, and your brethren shall be put to shame because of you, and to all the Gentiles shall you become a scorn. Now, this one mentions that you shall transgress against Yahuwah, stretching out hands to wickedness against him, which is kind of in line with what they did, right? It says, for our father Yisrael is pure from the transgressions of the chief Kohanim, who shall lay their hands upon the Savior of the world, or the deliverer of the world. And it says, my children, be you pure as the Shamayim is pure, is purer than the earth. And you, who are the lights of Yisrael, shall be as the sun and moon. Now, whether that was really from him, I can't say because the moon was given to Yahuda. But you can see there's two versions that say, but you be as lights like the sun and moon, which could be what it was trying to say. But right here it says that you shall be as lights in Yisrael, purer than all the Gentiles, right? Which it, the sons of Louis were going to be at a higher standard than all the children to begin with, because it says that those who draw near to me, by then let me be set apart, right? And for those that are given greater responsibility, there's also greater reward that was given to the sons of Aharon and Louis. But right here, to continue, it says, what will all the Gentiles or nations do if you be darkened through transgression? Yea, curses will come upon your race, and the light which was given through the law to lighten you and every man, you shall desire to destroy, and teach commandments contrary to the ordinances of Elohim. The offerings of Yahuwah you shall rob, and from his portion shall you steal choice portions, eating contemptuously with harlots. literally fulfilled in Eli and his children, spiritually fulfilled later on, as you guys will see, and as we have been if you paid attention. And out of covetousness you shall teach the commandments of Yahuwah. Wedding women shall you pollute. Wedded women shall you pollute, and the virgins of Yarushalayim shall you defile. And with harlots and adulteresses shall you be joined. And the daughters of the Gentiles or nations shall you take to wife, purifying them with an unlawful purification. And your union shall be like unto Sodom and Gomorrah. And you shall be puffed up because of your kahuna, lifting yourselves up against men, not only so, but also against the commands of Elohim. For you shall contemn the set apart things with jests and laughter, which was done with how they treated our Mashiach. It was how they despised the offerings in certain instances. You really have to read the Maccabees and the other things that are in scripture that are not in what we call the Bible to get the fulfillment, the fullness of how these things played out in what is written. And then you can see the application later on even more clearly. Therefore, the Hikkel, the temple, which Yahuwah shall choose, shall be laid waste through your uncleanness, and you shall be captives throughout all nations. And you shall be an abomination unto them, and you shall receive reproach and everlasting shame from the righteous judgment of Elohim. And all who hate you shall rejoice at your destruction. And if you were not to receive mercy through Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob, our fathers, not one of our seed should be left upon the earth. And now I have learnt that for 70 weeks you shall go astray, and profane the kahuna, and pollute the sacrifices, and you shall make void the Torah, and set at naught the words of the foretellers by evil perverseness. And you shall persecute righteous men, and hate the righteous. The words of the trustworthy shall you abhor, and a man who renews the law in the power of the Most High, you shall call a deceiver. And at last you shall rush upon him to slay him, not knowing his dignity, taking innocent blood through wickedness upon your heads. And your Kodesh places shall be laid waste even to the ground because of him. And you shall have no place that is clean, but you shall be among the Gentiles a curse and a dispersion until he shall again visit you, and in pity shall receive you through belief in water. And whereas this is why some people who profess to be believers and go beyond that to even be servants of the Most High, priests, if you will, this is why some of them just will do evil, work against the truth, and are literally causing this curse to be manifest because it was foretold that it would happen based on the decisions of our forefathers in these regards, and his word is true. It says, and whereas you have heard concerning the 70 weeks, hear also concerning the kahuna. For in each Yobel there shall be a kahuna, and in the first Yobel, the first who is anointed to the kahuna shall be great, and shall speak to Elohim as to a father, and his kahuna shall be perfect with Yahuwah, and in the day of his gladness shall he arise for the deliverance of the world. That first kahuna, that might have been with our Mashiach in the beginning, or this might have been Aharon and giving the kahuna, or Louis giving the kahuna. I'm not exactly sure how this plays out, but this is supposed to be another parable about the times and who's serving as a mediator, a type and picture of the kahuna of in the world during these times, right? We have a little bit of how this plays out not every Kohen lives for a Yobel, for example, or for exactly a week or however this is supposed to play out. So there's more nuances to this thing than we have the answers for, just so you know. This is in the second Yobel, he that is anointed shall be conceived in the sorrow of beloved ones, and his kahuna shall be honored and shall be esteemed by all. And the third Kohen shall be taken hold of by sorrow, and the fourth shall be in pain because of because unrighteousness shall gather itself against him exceedingly, and all Israel shall hate each one his neighbor. The fifth shall be taken hold of by darkness, likewise also the sixth and the seventh. And in the seventh shall be such pollution as I cannot express before men, for they shall know who do these things. That might be with Eli and his children again. Therefore shall they be taken captive and become a prey, and their land and their substance shall be destroyed. And in the fifth week, and well, that could be leading up all the way until the captivity, right? The first, possibly. And in the fifth week, they shall return to their desolate country and shall renew the house of Yahuwah. And in the seventh week shall come Kohanim, idolaters, adulterers, lovers of money, proud, lawless, lascivious, abusers of children and beasts. And after their punishment shall have come from Yahuwah, the kahuna shall fail. Then shall Yahuwah raise up a new Kohen, and to him all the words of Yahuwah shall be revealed. When the kahuna fails, that's when our Mashiach came. It was also when the lawgiver was no longer of Yahudah. When the Edomite was reigning, was when our Mashiach was born into the world, as it was foretold, right? And he shall execute a righteous judgment. Sorry about that. A righteous judgment upon the earth for a multitude of days, and his star shall arise in Shamayim as of a king, that king star that the wise men were looking for, lighting up the light of knowledge as the sun, the day. And he shall be magnified in the world, he shall shine forth as the sun on the earth, and shall remove all darkness from under Shamayim. And there shall be shalom in all the earth. The Shamayim shall exalt in his days, and the earth shall be glad, and the clouds shall rejoice. And the knowledge of Yahuwah shall be poured forth upon the earth as the water of the seas. And the messengers of and the messengers of the esteem of the presence of Yahuwah shall be glad in him when they sing when he was born, right? And the Shamayim shall be opened, and from the Hekel, or temple of esteem, shall come upon him sanctification, with the Father's voice, as from Abraham to Yitzhak. This is my beloved in whom I am well pleased. Hear him, right? And the esteem of the Most High shall be uttered over him, and the ruach of comprehension and set apartness shall rest upon him in the water. For he shall give the majesty of Yahuwah to his sons in truth forevermore. And there shall none succeed him for all generations forever. And in his kahuna the nations shall be multiplied in knowledge upon the earth, and enlightened through the favor of Yahuwah. In his kahuna shall sin come to an end. And this is the kahuna of Melchizedek, which is still reigning today, right? And the lawless shall cease to do evil, and the righteous shall rest in him. And he shall open the gates of paradise, and shall remove the threatening sword against Adam. And he shall give to the Kodashim to eat from the tree of life. And the Ruach of Kodashah, or set apartness, shall be on them, and Belial shall be bound by him. And he shall give power to his children to tread upon the evil spirits, and Yahuwah shall rejoice in his children and be well pleased in his beloved ones forever. Then shall Abraham and Yitzhak and Jacob exult, and I will be glad, and all the Kodashim shall clothe themselves with joy. And now, my children, you have heard all. Choose therefore for yourselves either the light or the darkness, either the law of Yahuwah or the works of Belial, which is a title for Satan that means without worth or worthlessness. And his sons answered him, saying, Before Yahuwah we will walk according to his laws. And their father said unto them, Yahuwah is witness, and his messengers are witnesses, and you are witnesses, and I am witness concerning the word of your mouth. Basically, you said it, don't change, right? And his sons said unto him, We are witnesses. And thus Louis ceased commanding his sons, and he stretched out his feet on the bed, and was gathered to his fathers after he had lived 137 years. And they laid him in a coffin, and afterwards they buried him in Hebron with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob. All right, and I'm pretty sure that's going to do it for us for today. We'll have to finish with the Testament of Benjamin next week, and that will be it for the Testaments of the 12. And then we'll have the Testament of Kohath and the visions of Amram to look over as two more witnesses of the intermediary period before the book of Exodus in chronological time. So thank you all for your time right here. I hope this was edifying. Please feel free to have any questions or comments in the chat or in the video if you feel so led. And you have a great Sabbath and a great week ahead. Shavua Tov. We will talk to you next time. Shalom.